Okay, everybody, welcome to today's video, which is about overtraining. Okay, so overtraining, there's basically two schools of thought. One is it doesn't exist, you're weak, you're not eating enough. Two, you all have it. The camp number two usually sells supplements to get you out of overtraining. So before we go any further, what is overtraining? Overtraining is essentially a state of being where your output during training is diminished, where you actually break down more muscle than you build, you don't recover properly, you don't sleep well, you're generally on the angry side, somewhat even depressed. Okay? So, how do you get there? So, basically, what we're striving for when we're training is overreaching. We're pushing ourselves for a new level of performance, right? And that's okay for time being, but if we are in that level of overreaching for too long, then we're reaching overtraining, at which point output is diminished, and it can even give us wrapped over. We're breaking down muscle, have kidney failure, and all that sort of thing. So, what are the different sort of levels of overtraining? So, one is basically muscular damage. That means the athlete is not consuming enough protein to repair the muscular damage. That happens very rarely. So nutrition is usually not the issue. That also goes for level two, which is glycogen replenishment. So if we don't consume enough carbohydrates, aka even the evil sugars, we're not recovering fast enough. So which is why training on keto is probably not the best way to strive for performance. But that also is relatively rare. Okay? Now, on the neurological level, that's what people overtrain. So people are rarely overtrained on a purely physical level. So neurological, here's what happens. You train, your noradrenaline or adrenaline output goes up, meaning you contract harder, your execution is better, you breathe better, your reps are a bit faster, they're more forceful, you're more motivated. That happens when adrenaline docks onto the muscles, the heart, and so on and so forth. But if those receptors get desensitized, the opposite happens, meaning no pumps, softer muscles, less recovery, takes longer, aches, pains, injuries, sleep disturbances, moodiness, and so on and so forth. You could also get all this by being on Facebook for too long, but it's a different story. So, why does it occur? Well, there's a couple of stressors, right? So basically, overtraining is being caused by too many of the following. One is volume. So if your volume goes up to a level where you can't recoup from, you're being overtrained. Two is failure. So if you're training to failure too often, then that also causes overtraining because it burns out your central nervous system. Then there's density, which is basically how much of a break do you take in between sets. So the less of a break you take, the harder the workout gets. Lastly, there's complexity, meaning obviously, let's say an Olympic lift is more challenging than a bicep curl, right? And lastly, there's what's called competition. So you can compete against yourself, other people, the numbers, you want to lift more, and so on and so forth. So basically, you have to pick your stressor. So you cannot do a high volume program of Olympic lifts, right? Or you cannot train 40 sets a workout and do them all to failure. So something has to give, right? You have to pick and choose from what is that you want. Then also, and this is hard in times of COVID, you have to move away from other stresses. I know a lot of you guys are worried about your job or, relationship and money and so on and so forth, and I get that. But the less stresses you have, the fewer stresses, the better the performance will be. So basically, if you're training to build the most amount of mass, you want to shoot for volume with perfect execution, but not going to absolute failure. If your goal is to be an Olympic lifter, you want to do high quality stuff on a lower rep range of Olympic lifts, right? So overtraining is not what it's being said, oh, you're not eating enough. Most of us have that part covered. It's the nervous system part that is basically being pushed too far, and therefore you can't recover. And when that happens, it can take a long time, you know. So for a little while you can mask with stimulants, but then that also goes away. So in conclusion, when you have, let's say, 3 to 4 to 5 workouts in a row that really didn't work out, you don't sleep well, you're not hungry or you're excessively hungry, you're generally moody, it's time to look into, do I have too much volume? Do I train too close to failure? Do I sleep enough? How is the density of my workout? And just take one of those stressors away. All right, Maik out.